that this spring's election taught us, it's that economic issues are forefront on the minds of Canadians. Maybe the biggest of those economic issues is the oil sands in northern Alberta. The oil sands are a big issue in politics because both sides have tried to affect legislation that will change the way that the industry runs. The Conservatives have basically had a hands-off approach, which has garnered them a lot of praise in Alberta and has obviously resulted in their sweeping of this last federal election. Whereas the Liberals have had basically, in my mind, a faulty principle of trying to legislate the oil sands to make them less polluting. And a really good example of a failed attempt at that is Stéphane Dion's Clean Air Act, which was, I think, in 2008, which was just a massive failure. What I would argue is that in order to find a solution to the problem of the oil sands pollution and their environmental unsustainability is that the issue needs to be depoliticized. So the biggest problem for me is that for the last 40 or so years, the Conservatives have had complete control in Alberta and have basically been unchallenged, which is something that oil companies love because, of course, when there's very little government legislation, they have nothing to stop them from these very harmful environmental practices that ultimately make them money. When I spoke to Justin Trudeau about 2 years ago or last year about if he thought the Liberals ever had a chance in Alberta again, he basically said no, not until the Albertans change their attitude. And some people would say this is kind of condescending, but it's true. Really what needs to happen is Albertans need to find the impetus for change within themselves. When I look back at the 1980s and what happened in Alberta when the NEP was introduced, there was a hugely faulty or hugely detrimental impact on the economy. And basically it tanked and people lost millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. So when I look to the future then, when I think of the example of the NEP, it just becomes so clear to me that Alberta needs to diversify their economy if they have any chance of staying viable in the next 50 or so years. And whether that's economically or environmentally viable, they basically mean the same thing. If there's any chance of Alberta continuing on this incredible growth trajectory that it's been on for the past 10 years, despite the 2008 downturn, obviously, there needs to be changes made in the fundamental principles governing the oil sands, but they need to come from Albertans themselves, and they can't be based on political actions of the Conservatives or the Liberals. What I would argue is that in this depoliticization of the issue, there needs to be way more research done into effective oil sands policies that reduce the environmental impact. So a good example is research done at the U of A. There is incredible things being discovered every day there in ways that you can make the oil sands much less harmful and much less detrimental to the environment. And if we want to continue that, oil companies also have to get involved, and they have to really find it within themselves to be environmentally sustainable, even if that comes at a cost of their productions in the short term.